name is Barbara Blake. I'm a Seven Sisters Ward councillor, and I am the chair of this committee. If the committee could introduce themselves, please, starting on my with Councillor Rice, please.
Can you hear? Reg Rice, councillor for Tottenham Hill.
Alex Worrell, councillor for Stroud Green.
Sue Jameson, councillor for Bruce Castle.
Councillor John Bevan, Northumberland Park.
All right. Councillor Sean O'Donovan from Tottenham Hill, substituting for one of the other councillors who isn't here tonight.
Councillor Scott Emery, Highgate Ward.
Councillor Brennan, Muswell Hill Ward. Is it working now? Councillor Amina Ibrahim, Knoll Park Ward.
Councillor Lottie Collett.
Hold it.
Councillor Lottie Collett, Woodside Ward.
Councillor George Dunstall, Stroud Green Ward.
Can you remember to switch off your mics, please? Thank you. So I will ask the officers present to introduce themselves, please, starting on my left.
Cody Sprott, Principal Committee Coordinator.
Justin Farley, legal officer.
Rob Shasovsky, Assistant Director for Planning, Building Standards and Sustainability.
Robin McKnocker, Head of Development Management.
Sarah Madonda, Planning Officer.
Suzanne Kimmen, Climate Change Manager.
Elisabetta Tonazzi, Conservation Officer.
Richard Truscott, Design Officer.
Oh, I did myself.
Joshua O'Donnell, Senior Transport Planner.
Maurice Richards, Transport and Highways.
Right, thank you very much. So we're on to item 1, that's filming at meetings. This meeting is being recorded. All registered speakers should be aware that they will be recorded for live or subsequent broadcast via the council's internet site or by anyone attending the meeting. We're on to item 2, which is the planning protocol. Members and speakers are required to note the information set out at item 2 on the agenda, so please note that. Item 3 is apologies. We have received apologies for absence from Councillor Bartlett, and Councillor O'Donovan will be her substitute. This is in accordance with committee standing orders 53 to 56. There are no items of urgent business, and we're on to item 5 now. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, just to confirm, a non-personal and a non-prejudicial interest in the Spurs applications, as I am a trustee of the Haringey Sixth Form College, and I also attend regular meetings with Spurs as part of their community liaison meetings.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan. Councillor Ibrahim.
Can you hear me? Yeah, with regard to item 10 and 11, a non-prejudicial interest. I hold a membership of Arsenal Football Club and I'm a member of IESA, Arsenal Independent Supporters Association. I will be viewing both items with an open mind.
Thank you very much. So we're on to item 7, which is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of November. Do we approve those? Yes, agreed. Okay, thank you for that. And so we're now on to planning applications, and we're on to item 9, which is Chestnuts Park, St Anne's Road. That's pages 11 to 60 in the pack. The proposal is a construction of a sustainable urban drainage and associated play features and biodiversity enhancements. The recommendation is to grant, and I would just like to read out something. So I have asked officers for advice on the procedure for making a motion regarding deferral of an item on this evening's list of business. Paragraph 10.11 of the planning protocol, which is part of the council's constitution, says, normally the subcommittee will hear representations on all sides before they make a decision to defer for any reason. So we will, as usual, follow the normal procedure. We will hear the officer's presentation, we will hear from the objectors, we will hear from the supporters, and then any decisions can be made, including on any motions. Thank you. So I will ask the planning officer now to introduce the application, and over to you, Sarah.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, members. The proposal is for construction of a sustainable urban drainage associated with play features, biodiversity enhancements. Good evening, Chair, and good evening, members. The proposal is for construction of a sustainable urban drainage associated with play feature and biodiversity enhancement. This slide shows the site highlighted in red, and the blue shows the extent of the park. The next slide shows the site highlighted in red, and the blue shows the extent of the park. The park is located within St Anne's Conservation Area and within a significant local open space and a local ecological value site The site is designated as sites of importance for nature conservation. The park is located within flood zone 1 and within a critical drainage area. Chestnuts Park is situated within a densely populated area with a high proportion of flats and dwelling houses. The Chestnuts Park Community Centre is situated on the southeastern corner of the site, adjacent to St. Anne's Road and Cornwall Road. Chestnuts Cafe is located on the southern boundary of the park, opposite the hospital. A tennis court, football pitch, and outdoor gym are located within the park boundary to the north of the community center. Centrally, the park consists of open grassland with footpath bordering the park. This slide shows the exact location and the shape of the SUDS feature. The construction of the SUDS feature would only occupy about 2% of the park, and the rest of the park will be retained. A bit of a background to the project. The applicant has advised that Haringey Rivers Forum and Friends of Chestnut Park were involved in developing the successful bid to the GLA for the flood elevation scheme. However, they now have raised concerns with the proposed development. Hence, the application was called into committee by Friends of Chestnut Park. The proposed development is funded by GLA, Environmental Agency, and Thames 21. The proposal will comprise of 2 basins. That is the lower level basin, which will be a wetland area, and the upper level, which will be a landscape recreational area. This slide shows the visualization of the SUD scheme in the park. In this slide, it shows the landscape proposal plan of the flood alleviation scheme. As you can see, the lower basin and the upper basin. The lower basin will be a wetland and the upper basin will be a seasonal SUDs with a landscape natural play area. The orange here will be the viewing platform, and the boxes in brown represents a log sitting amphitheater. The green circles represents a raised platform. I'll move on to some sections. This slide shows the cross section of the lower basin, which would have a typical water depth of 15 centimeters within the wetland. This slide shows the cross section of the upper basin, which will function as a storage feature, typically needed during times of very heavy persistent rainfall or storm. This basement will have multiple functions such that it will be used as a recreational space for the majority of the year when the basins are not filled with water. Generally, it's expected that the upper basin will function as an amenity space and a landscape natural play area with a viewing platform with timber play features allowing use for educational purposes. And this is another section. It shows the seasonal SUDs recreation area and the viewing platform onto the lower wetland feature. Moving on to the next slide, which discusses the benefits of SUDs feature. The introduction of the SUD scheme in Chestnut Park will protect at least 98 residential homes from flood risk, increase biodiversity by at least 38%, and meet the council's priority of climate change. The proposal will also provide an education tool for schools around this area and the local community. The function of the basin is to clean surface water through reed beds and thereby improving water quality. Overall, the proposal will provide a sustainable urban drainage basin that will prevent future flooding of residential properties as part of the council's flood mitigation measures, and in a natural way to enhance biodiversity by 38% and provide a landscape natural play area that will make a positive contribution to the existing park. Moving on to the next slide, I'll be discussing the main issues, which are the principle of the development, impact on open space and drainage, impact on neighboring amenity, parking, highway safety, heritage impact, trees, ecology, and biodiversity. In terms of the principle of the development, it is considered acceptable as it would enhance the existing park, prevent future flooding of residential properties as part of the council's mitigation measures in a natural way, and also enhance biodiversity and provide a natural play areas that will make a contribution to the existing park. Overall, it is considered the proposed development will comply with policy PS13, which states that new development shall protect and improve Haringey's parks and open spaces. The proposed development will also increase biodiversity by 38%, therefore complies with policy PS13, which states that all developments shall improve sites of biodiversity and natural conservation. The loss of open space has been minimized as the proposal comprises of a multifunctional recreational space. Therefore, the proposal will also comply with policy DM20 and policy DM25. The next slide is about impact on neighboring properties. The proposed development is not expected to give rise to a significant increase in terms of noise. There's a substantial separation distance from residential properties, approximately 39 to 42 meters away from properties on Lara Rose Lane, at least 34 meters from properties on Cranley Road, and 30 meters from Clarence Road, as seen on the next slide. The park is lined up by mature trees and a fence. Therefore, the SUDS basin will be screened. There will be no material loss of privacy to neighboring properties. The proposal is acceptable in amenity terms. On the next slide, I'm just showing you the separation distances. As you can see, as I said earlier, it's quite, isolated. So it's not very close to the neighboring properties. The next slide, I'll be discussing parking and highway safety. The transport officers have reviewed the proposal and are in support of the application, subject to construction management plan and cycle parking condition. In terms of the heritage impact on the next slide, the conservation officers were consulted and were in support of the proposal, as the proposal will enhance the existing park and will not have an impact on character or the setting of a heritage asset. The size of the basins were reduced in design terms, and the proposal follows design guidance and aims to maintain the recreational use of the site whilst also increasing biodiversity, flood alleviation, and enhancing the existing park. The proposed flood alleviation scheme would not significantly alter the character of the existing park, but rather add visual interest. In terms of trees, ecology, and biodiversity, the tree survey report was submitted. It indicated that no trees will be removed. There will be no tree works. The tree officer was also consulted and was supported by the tree officers, and they have recommended a number of conditions to be attached. In terms of biodiversity, one of the key benefits is that there will be a net gain in biodiversity by at least 38%, and this was supported by Nature Conservation Officer. Recommendation is to approve with conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does any members have any points of clarification, please, to the planning officer? Councillor Emery.
Thank you. It's just a point on the clarification document sent round. Can we get clarification on the actual number of objections? Because there's 3 different numbers on that sheet of paper.
We've received 29 objections.
Councillor O'Donovan.
Okay, thank you. One of the ongoing problems in London is misconnections between household pipeworks and where they flow. I know that this has been raised by the objectors, and also it's addressed in some of this paperwork as well. I know that one of the petitions of the objectors mentions that a foul wastewater that should go into sewerage may flow into this area. I know from other projects I've been involved in as a councillor, normally the misconnections are things like sinks and dishwashers and washing machines, which of course contain contaminants, but not in the same way as sewerage is. Could you clarify whether or not you've, as Thames Water stated, what these misconnections are of? Is it that dishwasher sink water, or is it sewerage water? In terms of the timing of the project, I note on page 57 and 58, it states that Thames Water are monitoring the situation. And the scheme will not connect the pipework which has the highest level of contaminants until the project has been completed by Thames Water. And again, it says the same thing on the following page. Thames Water have a process of procuring a programme to address misconnections, and the full scheme will not be connected until this project has been completed. I know that in the petitions, the objectors say they've been informed by Thames Water it may take many years, is the quote. Do you know the timing? Have Thames Water told you what the timing is of when they're going to be able to correct these misconnections? Thank you.
Councillor, it would be best if the applicant can address that because it's more technical.
Okay, so we'll save that for sorry. So we'll save that for the applicant questions, Councillor O'Donovan, if that's all right with you. So I'll move on to Councillor Jameson.
So I think part of my question, one of my questions would have to be for the applicant, but the other thing I wanted to know, was it in the presentation, it says that 98 houses will benefit from less flood risk. But I know that when there was a last set of floods, the houses were in a different place, I think. So how has that been, how has that information, how have we come to that information? Yeah, so how come, because when we were on the site visit, it looked like there was immediate houses around that were going to benefit from this, but it didn't seem that it's been particularly proven or backed up.
We're going to have to refer that to the applicant because they actually provided those figures. So, yeah.
Okay, so we'll pick that up again, Councillor Jameson, when we have applicants' questions, and I've made notes of that, so we'll make sure that those questions are addressed. So are there any further points of clarification from the committee? No, okay, thank you. So we now move on to the objectors. If the objectors would like to come forward, please, and sit at the table that says objectors. I think it's Kerry Williams and Ahmed Kamal. Thank you. So we have two objectors speaking this evening. And I think the committee clerk has explained you have 3 minutes each. So I will stop you at 3 minutes. So Kerry Williams, if Mr. Kamal, would you like to start first then, please? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm Ahmed Kamal. I'm chair of the Garden Residents Association. There are two key points that I'd like to draw the committee's attention to today as reasons why you should reject the scheme. The first is impact on the community. The Friends of Chestnuts Park have diligently cared for this park on behalf of the community for the past 2 decades. Their hard work has transformed this vital community asset in an area severely lacking in green space. As our elected representatives, you have a moral duty to consider their voice in opposition to this scheme and give it special weight. Moving forward with the current proposal would contradict the principles of the Haringey deal, which promise to involve residents in key decisions and community infrastructure design. The second issue is particularly relevant to this committee. The scheme claims to offer potential flood risk benefit to 98 local properties. But even if this was true, it's at the cost of sacrificing a significant portion of the playing field, I think more like 20% rather than 2%. And there's a question about whether that's fair for all park users. That's a political decision. In terms of technical objections, the Planning Committee report itself recognises that the SUD scheme has been made multifunctional to minimise, not totally eradicate, the loss of recreational space. This does not meet the GLA's requirement under Policy G4 regarding public accessibility to green spaces. Haringey Council's Policy DM20 also clearly envisages that it's in its accessibility of open space criteria. Policy DM20 also states that reconfiguration of open spaces will only be supported where it's part of a comprehensive deliverable scheme. But this application says nothing about how the scheme relates to the wider Chestnuts Park Master Plan, which has been consulted on. The addition of a second basin with a play area next to surfaced polluted water is ill-conceived at best and a public health issue at worst. And this is before you get into issues of inclusive, disabled-friendly design and safe and accessible environments and public realm, none of which we believe the current scheme meets. The report also asserts that the proposed flood alleviation scheme would not significantly alter the character of the existing park. However, this is a listed park and garden characterised by its openness. Removing 1/3 of the playing field would fundamentally change its nature and reduce both heritage and amenity value. The park is in the catchment of 5 local schools, and the loss of this open space for sports and physical activity could have a significant impact on children's health and well-being in the area of the borough most deprived of green space. We are passionately supportive of urban drainage, and that's why we're clear that this scheme should be withdrawn so that a better solution that meets the objective of park users as well as the wider area can be found. We encourage you to do the right thing and listen to the concerns, including of the over 1,000 residents who signed a petition against this scheme in just 3 days.
Could you wind up now?
Please withdraw this scheme.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so Ms. Williams, you have 3 minutes, please.
Okay. Thanks, I'm Kerry. I'm the chair of Friends of Chestnuts Park. We're just really sorry, Planning Committee, that you've been placed in this dilemma tonight. This project, we suggest, should not be before you in its current form. Most of you know this just by looking at the papers or noting all the objections with none in support, or the views of the one head teacher who was consulted who has expressed her concerns. Or when you went on Friday, seeing that fabulous open space that we have as the main area of Chestnuts Park. Any of us who've ever taken a kid to Chestnuts Park or any park, you know what it's like. When they see that space, the biggest open space, the only open space between Finsbury Park and Markfield, the children just run and run. But as you've been told by planning officers, you can't modify it. You either accept, reject, or ask for amendments and for it to come back. And you're going to have another motion, I understand, at the end of this debate. I've got 4 points. It's in the wrong location, wrong design, wrong timing due to the pollution corrections, and a poor evidence base. Wrong location, compromising the one wide space in the area of the highest open space deprivation in this borough. And our park is too small. No other local authority in the UK has imposed this kind of risky project on a small park. Firs Farm, Broomfield Park, they're huge. Can it be somewhere else? Yes, it can. Ask us questions afterwards. We've got lots of ideas. We're big supporters of sustainable urban drainage and members of Haringey Rivers Forum. It's the wrong design. These craters are risky. Look at the pictures of what's happened in Albany Park and other places. Drought is also a huge risk. And the second basin for incidental play, like logs and stuff, just like we've done in the areas we've made by Chestnuts Gate, the Willow Garden. We love that kind of stuff, but you don't bung it in the middle of the field, the one field. And we've also been told that if children start climbing down and playing and getting into the dirty water, they'll fence it, and that would be a solution. So not only do you have these craters in the middle of on the edge of the field, compromising that big open space, they're going to fence it. Absolutely crazy. Wrong timing. The water in the catchment is highly polluted, as Thames Water's told you. I spoke on Thursday to the manager who's managing this project, and this is fine. He was completely clear that he has tendered the investigation process. It will take 6 months, and they might find some nasty stuff. So shovels must not hit the ground in our park until the investigation is completed, at least in the autumn. He said it'll take a year to start correcting, and then it's on to enforcement.
Thank you.
Finally, it doesn't have a strong evidence base. Ask us, and it won't even clean the water. You'd need a much bigger project, and it risks embarrassment to our council. It's in the one area of the borough most deprived of green space. We've got the St Anne's development adding 1,000 new homes.
Thank you, Ms. Williams.
Please
That's
support
it.
and ask us questions.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Hymas, I know you're here. I saw you come. Would you like to Councillor Hymas, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, thanks so much. So I think I just basically want to echo what Amit and Kerry have already said. But it's worth saying that when this project was first started out, it was very much supported by the Friends of Chestnuts Park, by Kerry and by others who actually give so much time to making Chestnuts Park the place it is. I mean, honestly, there's hedges, there's the willow garden, even the playground. Like, the reason why the park was such a solace for people, especially in lockdown in an area which doesn't have much green space, is because of that work. So it's a real concern for me that we sit here today and have most of the local residents who use the park saying that we don't want this. I think that is, a failure basically of the process, because we all wanted really good flood mitigation. We really wanted to find the Stonebridge lock brook that's meant to run underneath the park that, would have been a brilliant thing to deculvert to bring to daylight. But actually we haven't found that. And what we're looking at is this water, which has run off from La Rose Lane, that's been described as dangerous to human health through bodily contact, to quote McCloy, who was one of the engineers who worked on the scheme. I don't think we want that, not just for the smell, but also for the danger to health that we've talked about already. So I think it's really important to put that in context, that this isn't, just opposition for the sake of it. This is opposition from people who have really engaged for a long time in this scheme and have come to the conclusion that it's not right for this particular park. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the fact that we approved in this committee 900 homes, like almost directly next door to this park a few months ago. So we're going to have thousands of new residents coming into a space, and a third of that park, a third of that green space may be at times like not usable. So when we already have huge pressure on our green spaces in our borough, I'm not sure why we should go ahead with this when there's already such local concern about the smell and the impact it's going to have on the usability of the park. But I also want to take this opportunity just to say that I know that the project team who have been working on this have done a lot of really good work. They've engaged really closely, they've had lots of meetings, they've consulted, they've done all the right things. It's not through a lack of engagement, a lack of trying. I think it's been the fact that, the timing is wrong, and the fact that the scheme isn't going to work in proportion in this park at this time. So I think we need to go back to the drawing board. We need to get our heads together, do some real proper deep work to understand both the technological aspects and the community aspects to make this work, and come back and present a scheme with a delay, hopefully, from the Greater London Authority to make it really effective and the kind of both flood mitigation that we desperately need in an ever more unstable climate, but also something that has wider public consent. So that's my argument. Thank you.
Councillor Hymas. Thank you. Okay. So members can ask questions of the objectors. So I have Councillor Collette first. I can't. Councillor Dunstall, sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for what you've said and coming this evening. It was mentioned at the beginning of the meeting that initially quite a lot of work was done closely with the council, and at some point there's been a divergence, should we say, of opinion. I just wondered if you could speak to that a bit more. Like, what were at what point in this process, how long ago did that divergence happen, and I assume over the issues that you've raised, but I'm just wondering what that looked like and what the discussions were, if that's what.
Thank you for that question. Yes, we're really sad to have to be in this locked position. For 23 years, we've had a fabulous, really, relationship with developing new projects in the park. We've project managed all the changes, really, and we've led the changes that we didn't project manage. We have worked for about the last 10 years to try and find the Stonebridge Brook, and we've done all this research at Bruce Castle, and we were part of amending and helping with the bid. And indeed, the flood risk to the number of properties, like any of you who've ever written a bid, we rather scraped that evidence in order to get the GLA money to justify doing this project like you have to do. We can answer questions about that later, but basically the money came through and then there was this huge delay. I have to bear in mind COVID, but the project team didn't get formed till really late. We chased and chased and chased, and then we had a project team and it worked really, really fast. Myself was there, I was there representing, there was someone representing, John was representing the Rivers Forum, and I was representing Friends of Chestnuts Park. We had monthly meetings, all by Zoom, nearly all by Zoom, the regular meetings. But once, in a very short period of time in the spring, where the meeting said, this is the option, not the option we had thought about, but an option of digging these craters in the middle of the field, we were very shocked. It took a while to really take it in, but I think at every meeting since then, at the end, I've had to just quietly say, I have to record that Friends of Chestnuts Park are very concerned and this, you know, with going ahead. So we've recorded asked for our dissent to be recorded. It really got worse and worse. And when we visited, McCloy, the engineer, said visit Albany Park. And we visited, because he said first that was the most similar. And we've got photos here of the absolute sort of, I can show you, I mean, we can show those, but of the cracked clay, it's drought that is one of the major threats to parks at the moment. The trees died and it's sort of baked clay and rubbish and dead vegetation. And so, but then we visited other places which were much larger and completely different from this. And so really by the time of the summer, we realized that we had to, the project just steamrolled ahead. And so we had to stand aside and say, we're going to have to do something. And it was only when we realised that it was just going to be steamrolled forward to planning that we realised we were going to have to oppose it. And then I think there were 29, both community organisations put in objections, and then there were 29 others. But as more and more people, especially parents of Chestnut School, have found out about it, on Friday, there's so many parents were contacting us that we started a petition on Friday afternoon, and after 2.5 days it was exceeding 1,000. I've just been looking at the postcodes. They are local. These are local people, N15, a few N17. There's now, there was 1,060 when the meeting started. There will be more now. We have struck the right chord. We've struck the right position. The head teacher is very concerned for all the reasons that we're concerned, and we haven't even had a chance to speak to the other schools who use the park, and so we had to make a stand. We're very unhappy about it because it's not how we usually, you know, we've done everything else in partnership, and we really want to resume that, and we've got loads of ideas for how we could move forward. There are ways that you could do suds work in this park without digging a hole in the main field.
Okay, thank you. Can you make sure you switch off your mics, please? Councillor Hymas, can you switch off your microphone?
Can I just add that you should have that petition now, Chair?
I just want to take some advice on that. Hold on. You haven't sent, have you sent the petition in? When did you send the petition in, please?
It was about 7:20.
That's after the meeting started, so I can't accept it. Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Emery, please.
Thank you. The question relates to the original proposals and how they compared the current design. A lot of the comments online speak about the initial proposal being something that was valuable, but then this doesn't match. But the comments from the planning officer suggest that they've gone with option one, which suggests that the council has actually gone with an initial design. But is there some disagreement with your side about this?
Well, we've been involved in conversations with the Environment Agency, Thames Water, and the council's flood officer, single flood officer, that I need to point out, where Enfield, you know, has had 11. And that's one of our complaints and difficulties, that we're not talking about a whole strategy on flood that takes in the front gardens being paved over in La Rose Lane. We just having Chestnuts Park taking the hit, and it's not even a high flood risk area. But so when you talk about original designs and what we talk about, we've been looking at designs and ideas for swales. We were hoping to be able to put swales perhaps across the north side of the park, on the margin of the park, something right at the edge of the park. But at that point, we were still hoping to raise the Stonebridge Brook, which hasn't been found, which, there's a considerable interest in raising the original brook that runs from Crouch End down to, comes out at the Martfield. And so when we talk about original, we're talking about conversations that we've been in for 10 years, not these conversations of the last 8 months. When we had the planning meeting, the choices between, there weren't any choices between basically having it in that
I think
location.
you have covered that point
Yes,
in the
so
previous answer. So thank you for that. So Councillor Ibrahim, please.
Yeah, so mine was the point of clarification, because obviously I'm going to ask a question later on around the 98 properties that are alleged flood risk. So I was slightly confused. So are you agreeing that those properties are at flood risk, or are you saying that isn't a huge issue?
Compared to flood risks in the borough, that little valley of what was have been the Stonebridge, the route of the Stonebridge Brook, is not one of the major flood risks that's facing you. And if you read the McCloy's Section 19 report from January 2022, that was made after we had those extraordinary 2 days, and indeed there was surface water flooding at the junction by the shop on the Rose Lane, and his analysis doesn't mention, I've got a copy of the 2 relevant pages here, doesn't mention bunging a great hole in our main field would have solved that. He talks about block gullies and other possible sources.
Sorry, that I'll repeat that. That was going to be my follow-up. So is there a challenge in the area around blocked gullies?
A challenge from us? Sorry.
No.
Oh,
no,
there is.
Is there a problem?
His analysis, I brought a copy here that I can pass around. His analysis is that could be it. I mean,
so
it's complicated. The houses, there's no houses that are flooded in this area. Some of the gardens at the eastern side of Farmer Road have, their back gardens are slightly wet, but they're wet. But we're not talking houses that have flooded.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Williams.
And there are other measures that could deal with that.
We've heard that answer. Thank you. Okay. So any further questions? Oh, Councillor Dunstall, quickly then, please.
I just wondered really quickly if you could just talk us through some of the alternatives that you envisage using this funding for.
In the minute that I'm probably allowed, this is 10 years of conversations that you're talking about. And funnily enough, this afternoon, when we weren't sure what was happening tonight, we had a fantastic conversation about some of those options. There are some major options. For example, we are supporters of surface.
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Councillor Dunstall, we are considering this application, not any alternatives. So apologies for stopping you, but this is the application that we are considering and not any alternatives. So
okay, I'd love to talk on that topic, and we're hoping to have meetings about that. We've got masses of information about that.
Okay, thank you very much. So right, I do now want to hear, we all want to hear from the applicant team. So if I can hand over to yourselves, and you have 9 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Good evening, everybody. For everybody else, I'm Simon Farrow. I'm the council's head of Parks and Leisure. And I'm going to speak for a short while about the application. In recent years, Haringey has experienced flash floods on a scale previously unheard of, particularly in areas that surround Chestnuts Park as a high flood risk area. The council's Parks and Green Spaces strategy was developed through extensive co-design and approved by the Cabinet on the 11th of July this year. The Parks and Green Spaces Watercourse and Flood Risk Plan was part of that. A component part of the wider strategy stated that parks and green spaces will be an important element of the overall approach to managing this increased rainfall, and this will mean that parks will need to be adapted to do so with enhanced capacity to capture and store water. This scheme has been developed in line with the Parks and Green Spaces strategy, the council's climate change objectives, and the Haringey Deal principles of co-design and stakeholder engagement from the inception. Haringey Council, with significant involvement from the Rivers Forum and the Friends of Chestnuts Park, submitted a bid to the GLA to deliver flood alleviation within the park. This project has been developed following the successful funding bid. These key stakeholders have continued to be fully involved in the project development, sitting on the steering group and being party to all the data and design development. In addition, public consultation undertaken in this summer saw 77% support for the scheme. Through this process, we've heard varying views and consider that we've addressed the stakeholder concerns in the following ways. Firstly, there is concern that the feature is too large for the park. The initial bid submission by the stakeholders was over 5,000 square metres in size across 2 locations within the park. This application is now under half that size, with only half being a permanent water feature and the other half usable recreational space, providing additional flood attenuation during high flood events. The feature has been located where the water naturally flows, and some localised regrading will be undertaken across the wider grass areas to address ponding on the main field. The feature, due to its nature, will be sunken, and as such will have minimal impact on views across the grassed area. Therefore, we have reduced the size of the scheme, yet maintained the flood protection storage requirement of the funder whilst protecting 98 homes downstream through the very significant flooding. It was also improved the biodiversity of this section of the park by around 38% and retained recreation space within the feature. The second area of concern is that the scheme has departed from the original aim of opening up the culverted Stonebridge Brook. As stakeholders are aware and have acknowledged in their letters to the planning service, we have been unable to find the route of the brook, perhaps because of its depth. As such, it's no longer a viable option. There is also belief that this is an experimental scheme, yet similar schemes have been developed by neighbouring boroughs, such as Enfield and Waltham Forest, including in school playgrounds and parks of a similar scale, such as Chingford Memorial Park. Council officers have met with both councils to share lessons learned and best practice, and this is fed into the design development. The quality of the water being brought into the park has also been raised as a concern. We undertook testing of the 2 surface water sewers serving the water feature, the water sewers serving the water feature on 3 occasions between October 22 and November 23. It should be noted that the results of greatest concern were taken during a prolonged dry spell, leading to a higher concentration of potential pollutants than would ordinarily arise. Some of the funding is predicated on the water requiring cleaning before it enters the watercourses downstream. Therefore, the planting has been designed to clean the water as it runs through the wetland and partially address any smells. The planting will act as a nature-based protective barrier, so it will not be easier to access, and there'll be signage to alert users of the presence of the water. However, noting stakeholders' continued concerns, we will now deliver the scheme in a phased manner. Of the 2 surface water sewers being diverted, the one to the north is shown to have a lower base flow and increased contamination levels than the southern surface water sewer. Thames Water is initiating a project to identify and address sources of misconnections which are causing contaminants in the water. This is, however, a time-consuming activity and may take over a year to 18 months to conclude. Therefore, it is proposed to construct all necessary pipework to divert the 2 surface sewers in the wetland now, with the final connection to the more polluted northern one only being made when Thames Water Misconnections project is completed. This will enable the project to bed into the park and minimise the amount of contaminated water coming into the scheme on a day one. Finally, there's stakeholder concern regarding the future maintenance of the feature. We've shared a maintenance and management plan with stakeholders, which has been developed by the Parks and Highway Service to cover the maintenance of the entire feature and details the process if there are issues of increased water contaminants. As part of the construction of the scheme, we will procure 3 years of maintenance for the scheme while the planting is becoming established, the most resource-intensive element of the scheme, and the Parks and Highways are committed to ensuring ongoing maintenance after the first 3 years. In summary, the scheme will make a significant contribution to addressing flooding, both ponding within the park and over 98 homes downstream. We will improve biodiversity of this area of the park by 38%. We will clean between 29,000 and 43,000 litres of water per day. It has been developed with stakeholders' involvement through every step of the design process. It has a level of public support through the survey of 77%. Sought to minimise the impact on recreational space within the park, yet maximise the flood storage capacity and water cleansing opportunities, and has addressed concerns raised by stakeholders regarding water quality and maintenance through the phased delivery and robust maintenance commitments. The funding is time limited, needs to be spent before the end of March. I'll leave you with one last comment from the consultation this year. Love the idea generally for biodiversity and flood relief. I actually had a garden room which was below the water level and it flooded right over the waterproofing, ruining the structure. I'm obviously very keen on the idea from a personal view for increasing biodiversity and for positive social outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you. I should have asked you to introduce yourself before, so it's Simon Farrow. You give your title as well.
Chair, I did. Again, Simon Farrow, Head of Parks and Leisure. I'm joined with some colleagues for answering any questions.
Okay, thank you. So you did address the questions from Councillor Jamieson about the misconnections, but you didn't actually say about what Thames Water's timings were to correct the misconnections. Do we know that?
Yes, we've been in conversations with them and it is in their works programme. So they've identified the catchment as one of their priority catchments to start the process. But as we mentioned, it is a time, a lengthy process. As Kerry mentioned, there's like they've got to do investigation. They identify where the misconnections are. Then there is a process of corresponding with the residents. And then if that doesn't work, there's enforcement. So it can take 1 year to 18 months, that kind of time frame.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I've got Councillor Ibrahim and then Councillor Brennan. Thank you.
So my question was in relation to the 98 properties at risk of alleged risk of flood risk. Why don't we clear the gullies? It's a straightforward question.
Yeah, hi, my name's Stephen Goodchild. I'm working for GHD, working with Harrogate Council. We were dealing with the planning application and coordinating the associated accompanying reports and coordinating the design. When we first got involved in the project, there was a clear understanding of what documentation and supporting reports were required to validate the planning application. One of those is the flood risk assessment. That looks at a catchment wide scenario in terms of surface water and flooding. And within that report, there's clarity with regard to the flood modelling that was undertaken and the identification of the properties which were generally to the north of the park. So there's mapping and clarification within the FRA that was submitted to identify those properties and the scenarios in which that report was submitted in line with EA, in line with discussions with Thames 21 and the local officer as well.
Sorry, can I just follow up?
Okay, a quick one.
I'm not sure that was my question. My question was, why aren't we clearing the gullies?
Can you switch off your microphone, please?
I think the issue is, yes, absolutely, that gully cleaning can help to a certain extent. But what we're talking about is this extreme weather where the water's flowing so quickly that the gullies wouldn't be able to take the water in anyway. So, and that's what's been modeled. So when we say 98 homes are going to be protected, that's a 1 in 20 flood event, which actually are coming more and more frequently now. So it's probably more like a 1 in 10 type of event. So it's when the water's flowing. I think that she's asked if it's ever happened there. There have been floods in some of the properties downstream that have already been identified, as stated by Simon's comment at the end of his speech.
Councillor Ibrahim, just to follow up, I'm happy to go away and check this for you, but my understanding when I left the office today was that 2018 and 2021 are the dates that I was told. I'm not obviously the flood risk manager, but that's what I was told were the last 2 events in that area.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan. Yeah.
Press it and hold it. Sorry. So my question is a little bit, it's related to the biodiversity. Now, you show in your papers a picture of the studs at Chingford, and I've been there, they're beautiful. The difference is they're in a much, much larger green space. I know that somebody said that these studs will only take 2% of Chestnut Park, but it's actually maybe 25% of their lawn, of their grass. So could you explain, one, exactly how you're going to enhance the biodiversity by 38%, because that's quite a lot, apart from, you've only mentioned trees really. And secondly, would this suds not work if you put it off the green space? If you put it somewhere that wasn't on the grass, would it simply not work?
Yeah, so when we start to look at the projects and the feasibility stage design, there was an option to look at a swale or a reel running along La Rose Lane. We are in a conservation area. There's tree protection issues and also heritage setting issues that we needed to kind of look at. So the scheme that we've got at present has responded to a detailed arboricultural impact assessment, which basically sets out where development should take place. We've basically removed any excavations, and really the development has been moved away from the trees that have been identified as moderate value, moderate condition. So the scheme has been informed by an ecological survey. Outside of the mature trees and the less intensive grass habitat around the edge, really the rest of the amenity grass is considered of poor condition. Ecologically, it's a modified grassland, and so basically we're looking to balance that and replace that within the footprint of the scheme so that we've got a more diverse grassland habitat, plus the introduction of additional hedge planting around the edge of the scheme, still mindful of intervisibility, public surveillance, is also providing that increase in biodiversity. So it's twofold: protect what we've got, respond to that in terms of design development, and then look for an enhancement strategy, which we have undertaken, plus the wetland area, which equates to about 1,000 meters squared within the grassland area, is again adding to that biodiversity net gain. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So Councillor Emery.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm aware of the locations in the borough which have significant problems with flooding. So, and also aware this area wasn't very high on that list. So was this site chosen to alleviate the effects of the coming homes, or was it to do with the bid site being quite specific?
Councillor, it is on. So, Councillor Emery, I think in the initial stages, it was responding to the fact that there was a desire by the Friends to see the daylighting of the Stonebridge Brook, and that's why it was further up the list than other locations might have been in the borough. That's the genesis of why Chestnuts Park, why now, why this funding stream.
Thank you. Councillor Worrell?
Thank you. Is that on? Yeah. That was, yeah, kind of related to my question. It was just if you could say about, obviously, we all acknowledge this is a relatively small green space. So if you could just kind of say on why this location specifically, and if you could respond to, if you could say where the 98 homes actually are, and maybe say a little bit more about that evidence, because when some of us visited the site, I think it wasn't immediately obvious which homes that, you know, that would serve.
I'll cover the flood issue. The properties, as I said before, within the FRA, so the flood risk assessment that was submitted as part of the planning application, looked at the modelling, flood modelling, and has identified generally properties around Clarence Road and to the north of the park as the likely flow path for that flood inundation.
And in terms of the location, the original bid had two water features. One was up where the concreted area is, where the old warehouses were, and the other one was identified in this location. Water can't flow uphill, and the way that the land flows down, plus where the water is already accumulating, meant that we physically couldn't get the water sort of over the existing culvert that you can see runs across the grass area. We can't get the water over the culvert to the area where I do appreciate there's lots of antisocial behaviour, etc. So it might have been I thought it was a good location for that feature, but we physically couldn't get the water there. But we could still get the water in the second location for the feature, and that's what we did. And then we developed that, as we've mentioned before. The rules, unfortunately, to protect the trees, we couldn't have those in those locations, but the water's flowing down towards that corner, hence why it's the location that it is. And the shape that it is, again, is to try and maximize the storage without minimizing the amount of area of the recreational space that we take.
Can I just add to that? There was a quote saying that we weren't aware of the wider master plan that's taking place in Chestnuts Park. We did actually meet and have workshops with the architect, so we're aware of the wider aspirations of the park. And as Sam had just mentioned, the final location and the shape and the balance of amenity space and wetland has been, you know, influenced by the existing site conditions, but also listening quite carefully to the wider stakeholders and the engagement through the planning application. Also, we are not talking about massive craters. We are talking about excavations that are between 1 metre and 1.5 metres in depth. And again, that is mindful of, you know, the amount of material that, you know, we would look to try and reuse on site. But yeah, our proposals were developed in line with the architect undertaking the master planning was aware of the scheme and the location and the scale of it.
Okay, thank you. I have got you down, Councillor Jamieson. So I've got Councillor Collette then, please.
Thank you. I'm a country girl originally, and I've dug many a ditch because I grew up in a floodplain. I noticed that the sods on High Road in Woodside Ward are pretty ill maintained, and they only appear to be maintained in actual fact by the Friends group of the Memorial Gardens. Can you tell me what maintenance is intended for this? Because biodiversity needs maintenance. Thank you.
Absolutely. So as part of the construction work,
we would also procure the landscapers to undertake the first 3 years of maintenance. So that would already be paid for as part of the capital works, and there would be a regular maintenance plan that is in the landscaping schedule that was submitted as part of this application. So that's at the most intense period of when everything is becoming established. Then going forward from that, a maintenance plan has been shared with the Friends that looks at both how the clearing of the reeds around the inlets and outlets, the maintenance of the drainage elements, and then also the maintenance going forward. But they've been designed as well for minimal maintenance, understanding that obviously resources are limited in terms of the council. So they've been designed looking forward to reducing maintenance as time goes on.
Thank you. So I've got Councillor Jameson.
So on our site visit, it was explained to us that it was the best place for the SUDS, and the presentation suggests it's the best place. But really, could it be the only place, given that you can dig ditches?
As Sam's already mentioned, there's some quite obvious constraints within the scheme. If we're looking to balance flood attenuation and provide that flood protection alongside looking at water quality as well, the existing connections to that water source is in relation to the existing kind of stormwater sewers. So the location, again, partly because of the existing infrastructure that's there, but also, as Sam has pointed out, topography is suggesting that that's the lowest area. It also taps into the existing field drainage within the playing field. So we're actually providing additional attenuation, additional space features to overall improve the drainage within the residual amenity grassland area, which was again mentioned by the Friends as an issue. We're also looking at smaller scale ditches or seasonal kind of swales where we can to accommodate that as well. So it's all about that balance of trying to come up with some features that aren't too extensive, mindful of the environmental sensitivity, and not requiring a lot of maintenance, and at the same time providing a more diverse environment for flora, fauna, and people as well. Educational resource. We had a very positive feedback from the consultation, and that's why we included a viewing platform and a kind of amphitheatre to allow school children and other groups to use that upper level, which is more obvious and more visible.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Donovan, I'll bring you in. Councillor Ibrahim, you have already asked a question, but sorry. Okay, but I think I want to bring this to a close now. So Councillor Ibrahim, sorry, I'm confusing everyone. I'm going to bring Councillor O'Donovan in, then Councillor Ibrahim, and then I'm closing off the questions. Thank you.
Thanks. It's coming back to the Thames Water's misconnections. And as the document mentions a couple of times, the Thames Water's process of addressing those misconnections. And it says that the full scheme will not be connected until this project has been completed. And I think that may address one of the objectors' points where I think Sherry said that not a spade should be put in the ground until that problem has been resolved. However, that doesn't seem to appear either at the start or in the appendix as one of the formal conditions of this application.
Chair, if I might take that one. So the intention is for that to be picked up in condition 4, the management and maintenance plan, but we'd be happy to include some enhancements to make that absolutely clear that the connection should not be operational until such time as the misconnections have been satisfied.
Sorry, Councillor Bevan, did you have your hand up? You haven't asked a question of the applicant, so I will bring you in now. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad to hear your response about maintenance, because maintenance of SUDS is sadly lacking in Haringey, so I'm pleased with that assurance. One other point, I know this used to be a watercress farm, and I'm aware that I'm not sure about the whole park, but in the winter, a great part of that park is really muddy, or if not all of it. So you said, I think, that this scheme will help prevent that. Have I got that wrong, or is that correct? It will help prevent other parts of the parks from getting really muddy?
Yes, so where there are localized divots or the water ponds, lower areas. So what we would be using is some of the soil that we dig out, we would be then using to sort of regrade the rest of the grassed area so that it would minimise the amounts of ponding along the rest of the grassed area. And again, in the summer, it would help with the sort of the cracks that occur.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Ibrahim, and that's the last question now.
Yeah,
Thank
my
you.
question was about maintenance because I'm slightly, so I suppose my question is I'm slightly concerned that whilst I recognise that Councillor Bevan is reassured by the 3 years, I'm concerned about what happens after the 3 years because bearing in mind what Councillor Collette has said about the lack of maintenance at the one in opposite the Civic Centre that's dependent on the friends of groups, then obviously there's currently a challenging relationship over this particular scheme. So after 3 years, how are you assured that the friends of group are going to be willing to take on the maintenance, and have you risk assessed taking this approach towards maintenance in the future where there could be challenges around public health? Have you thought about the fact that it sounds like it's about a metre deep and the discarding of rubbish within it? It's within a park, so we maintain our parks. Why would we not commit to continuing the maintenance of this scheme that we're putting there and then leaving it to the Friends of Group to continue that maintenance? 3 years will go by very, very quickly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ibrahim, we get the question. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. It's a very clear principle in our work with the Friends that their work in any park across the borough is additional to the core maintenance responsibilities of the Park Service. And the Friends do an absolutely fantastic job across the borough in supporting the maintenance of many, many green spaces across the borough. And all credit to Kerry, over all the years that I've known her, the Friends have been incredibly active in the park. As Sam has said, there is this 3-year maintenance plan going in, which is about intensive maintenance for those first 3 years. And then after that, there's a split between us, my service and the highway service in terms of maintenance of the asset. So if it's a hard bit of drainage infrastructure, so the pipes and the concrete and all that kind of stuff, then that falls to my highways colleagues to look after. And then the green landscaping side of things will be down to the Park Service to maintain. And we have been fortunate in that we've been able to add back some resources in the last year and a half, and we're currently recruiting for more resources at the moment. So I think we're moving to a better position. I'm sure Kerry and I would agree that it hasn't always been the best maintained park in Haringey, but we are moving to a stronger position. And if I may, Chair, just the Assistant Director's on Teams, but you didn't see his hand come up. So he wanted to answer the question about the gullies to say we now much more fully maintain the gullies since all the flooding in 2021. And so there's an active programme, I believe, of at least every 6 months, the gullies are being cleaned across the borough. There are priority gullies within that, but he's keen, obviously, always to work with residents on identifying areas that need further attention. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So that's clarified the gullies issue. Right, thank you. So I'd like to ask Robbie McKnocker to confirm the proposal with a summary of any changes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So there's an enhancement to condition 4, as I mentioned earlier, that the basin shall not, the connection from the northern drainage shall not connect until the misconnections have been addressed, and that's part of the management and maintenance condition. Otherwise, the recommendation is to approve subject to the conditions in the report.
Okay, thank you. So we'll now move to the vote. As Robbie McKnocker says, the recommendation is to approve. So all those in favour, please show. Okay. All those against? And then any abstentions, please? One abstention. So it was 5-5 with and one abstention. So the chair's casting vote, and my casting vote is that we approve this this scheme. Okay, thank you. So moving on. So we have that's the end of that item. This scheme is approved. So moving on then to item 10, which is the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, which is 748 High Road, Tottenham. And this is pages 61 to 390. Okay, thank you.
Hi all.
So would the members like to look at the model, please? This is there. Thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. Can we please take our seats so that we can continue with the meeting, please? Thank you. Could everybody take their seat now, please? Thank you. Okay, councillors, can you quickly take your seats, please? Where's councillor?
Good evening. Can everyone hear me? I'm not sure if Rob has introduced that I'm doing this remotely.
Yes, Sam, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. Sorry, apologies that I can't be there in person, especially when we have the model in the house, and I didn't actually get to have any of that discussion. But hopefully, all the hard work's been done there. So yeah, this is
Sam,
the
sorry,
Northumberland.
we're just waiting on a couple of councillors to return to the room.
Oh, sorry.
So just bear with us.
Showing up the shortcomings of a remote.
Councillors, can you sit down, please? Could you hurry up and sit down, please? Sorry, not sit down. Sorry. We have, can you sit down quickly, please? We're waiting. Okay, so we're now on to item 10, Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, 748 High Road, pages 61 to 390 in the agenda. I won't read out the proposal because that is in the agenda. The recommendation here is to grant, so I will hand over to the planning officer to introduce this application, please.
Yep. Hi, everyone again. Good evening. Apologies for not being there in person. So this is related to the Northumberland Development Project by Tottenham Hotspur, and specifically to Plot 3, which you may have just seen on the model, but just for points of clarification, you can see my cursor. It's this three-tier building here. So the application is a Section 73 minor material amendment to the permission granted in 2016 for plot. This is specifically for Plot 3 of that hybrid permission, which was the master plan for the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. So the proposal, as an overview, is to increase the height between 21 to 27 metres, or an additional 8 stories, to a maximum height of 127 metres, which covers about 30 stories. So the site was approved as Plot 3 Hotel and was subsequently amended through a non-material amendment in 2017 to allow the residential use of the top floor service departments. So the proposal retains 180 hotel rooms and 49 residential apartments as approved, but does improve the layout, design, and as I say, the height of the building. Just a quick look at that original hybrid permission from 2016. The plot 1, plot 2 and plot 3, which were the stadium, the Tottenham Experience and this plot 3, which was the hotel, they were all approved as full planning permission. And then plot 4 in the bottom here and plot 5 and plot 6 right at the top were all approved as outline permission. So that means they're subject to reserved matters at a later date. The other relevant history, as I said, just to emphasise, was that the hotel, the top floors were amended to allow them to be used as a residential use class. This is a quick look at what was approved previously in the 2016 approval. This is the hotel here, and they're related to the stadium, Tottenham Experience, the Extreme Sports Building, and this is the permission for the residential plots. So in terms of the scope of the application and Section 73 amendment, this is just a plot 3 of that extant hybrid plan permission. It is to be considered in the context of what was previously approved and how it relates to that delivery of the wider master plan. There have been policy updates since the approval, most notably the MPPF most recently in 2023 and London Plan 2021. The general principles remain as approved. That is of a mixed-use development with hotel and residential as approved, and a tall building, which was approved in the extant permission. The fallback position for the applicants would be to build the design that they had in that extant permission. So again, just looking at the proposed building here, this does add the additional 21 metre at the lowest points to 27 metres at the highest point of the proposed building. This is to do with the angled design of the building. You can see in here that it's a more slender design, and as I say, there's a series of blades, and this really emphasises it as a landmark wayfinding building as part of the wider master plan. You can see here they've got a staggered massing of 3 distinct parts, with the lower massing in the darker material, and then the shoulder massing, and then the top part up here with plants on the roof as well. It's gone for amended materiality of the lower part, which will relate more closely to the conservation context of the high road, and then has used planar blades on the top parts, which seems more contemporary and related to the emergent context of the wider sites. This has gone for an introduction of a front canopy above the forecourt, which you can only just about make out here, but we'll look at in more detail later. And this has got associated seating above it. And there's also reduced massing between the proposed building and the adjacent stadium. Just to look a bit more at that reduced footprint or amended footprint that we have here. So in the approval on the left, that was the yellow part here is the approved footprint. And then you see the new footprint that's been put forward here. Bear in mind with those staggered massing as well that the top part obviously is a slender part there. So the reduced footprint in relation to the stadium means that you get more of a gap between there. So it'd be 20 metres in parts and 26 metres in the highest massing. There would be some closer relationship with regard to the extreme sports building, but the angle of the building and the non-residential use of that mean that's less of a concern. Just looking at the proposed amendments in a bit more detail, as I say, it remains as 49 residential apartments. These have had significantly improved layouts with private and communal residential amenity spaces provided. This is a distinct residential and hotel cores now. This is part of that is to do a fire requirement, but to have an improved hotel layout, residential layout there. You can see here that the residential entrance in orange and the hotel in yellow, so you get that distinction between the two, and also in the height of the building as well. As approved, there was a significant viability deficit with no affordable housing, and unfortunately it still would be in deficit, so we would still retain no affordable housing on this site. There is an existing car park that's been developed as part of the existing parts of the building of the wider master plan, and this would retain 64 car parking spaces, but that is from the 76 approved. I should mention that is above what we would normally expect for this site as well. There was also 114 cycle parking spaces. This is an increase from the 12 of the original approval and 64 from the amended approval. So just important to consider this in the context of what was approved in 2016 for the site. And in that context, the retaining the Tottenham Football Club in the area was seen as a key driver in the regeneration of Tottenham. In 2016, White Hart Lane and Northumberland Park wards were the second and fifth most deprived wards in London, and also low nationally as well. So there clearly was a need for socio-economic improvements. The hybrid permission highlighted significant employment opportunities over the construction period and upon completion of the stadium and associated developments as well. The recent Tottenham article in the Evening Standard highlighted that there was a gross value added of 296 million for Haringey in the 2021-22 season, which was the first full season after COVID. So this shows the socio-economic benefits at the stadium. The hotel will provide significant additional employment and additional tourism. The applicant is committed to provide specific educational training for local students, as well as the employment within the hotel. And during the construction phase, we'll also prioritise Haringey residents in jobs and apprenticeships. So the application achieves the mixed-use residential-led site allocation requirements, which also still align with the updated London Plan and NPPF policy position. There would be an increase in the hotel floor space, which you can see on this table here is gone up from 15,500 to over 16,500 square metres. The improvements in residential floor space on this site increase the residential floor spaces that will be on plot 3, but they do not need to increase the overall residential maximum capacity for the site, which is predominantly on plot 5. That is still at outline permission stage, and those final designs will consider the layout in the final reserve matters for that. In terms of the phasing for the development, this was originally envisaged to come forward with the hotel, the residential plot 5 and the extreme sports building all in one go, but due to a number of unforeseen issues, that's not the case now. And this hotel is being looked to take forward as part of the imminent Euro 2028 tournament. But we should add that the phasing for plots 4 and 5 are being progressed, and we have approved some reserve matters for them. The only other change on the table is just that the used car orders has changed and that's been adapted. Just shown in the adaptation of those. So just to look at the viability position, affordable housing, and the approach to unit mix and site optimisation. So the extant hybrid permission had no affordable housing. Important to point that out, and even in the plot 5 and on the non-material amendment to this site, and that was due to a viability deficit, and that has been that was assessed at the time. In isolation, viability of this plot is still in deficit, and that's not accounting for the additional cost of the stadium delivery. The viability of this plot is well below a viability that could accommodate affordable housing. Sales values have risen slower than the significant rise in construction costs. So that's one of the main factors, but obviously there are a number of factors that come into this. The third party BNP Paribas have reviewed the viability assessment, and they have done a sensitivity test, which did show that even if values were approximately 80% higher, this plot would still only be able to just about provide affordable housing. And if it did, that affordable housing would be off-site. In that context, a larger number of smaller units would not have had a significant impact on the viability, which was a key factor that we wanted to explore. Large units on plot 3 also make up a small percentage, around 7% of the wider residential, which would be offered on plot 5, which, as I say, would be a more conventional size of flats there. Site optimisation and delivery of this hotel residential plots. The applicant has favoured larger units on this plot 3 due to specific branding with iconic views of the stadium and the links to the hotel, and this is considered to be reasonable in this context. So just having a look at those uses within the hotel, the key here, I'm not sure how clear that is on the big screen, but the dark yellow here is the podium restaurant and bar. And then the lighter yellow is the hotel rooms. And then we have the orange as the residential flats with the larger residential units on the top floors. The middle area here from flat on level 14 would be the residential amenity space, and then we have the 2 floors of hotel amenity spaces. I'll look at all that in a bit more detail as we progress. The amendments to the roof have also allowed them to provide space for any air source heat pumps that might be required in future, and the PV panels which will be provided from the outset. So just looking at floor by floor, just to whiz through these, this is the podium level, which would be the bar restaurants area, which exits out onto directly out onto 2 landscaped parts of the site. This is the northern part here, which would be sort of overflow from the bar seating area, and then on top of the canopy here, which you can just about make out where the dash line is. I can have a look at that in more detail. That's also going to have a lot of seating as well, and will be another area for outside amenity space for that use. This is just looking at floors 2 to 11, which is the hotel uses. Variety of size of rooms. They have their own lifts which are designated to the hotel, and they will also have use of the hotel amenity spaces. These are located on floors 12 and 13. I've just shown floor 13 here as an indicative idea of what would be up there. And we have the restaurants area, lounge areas, and also the external terrace area with swimming pool. This provides, as I say, restaurant, bar, and co-working space. So in terms of those internal layouts and how they relate to the residential living conditions, the extant hybrid permission of the previous approval has smaller floor spaces, which has single aspect units, majority of which had no private amenity space, and the only communal amenity spaces were shared with the hotel public, and obviously there's no play space within that. So what we have got in this application is significant improvements in floor space above the minimum levels, at least dual and in many cases triple aspect, generous private amenity spaces for all of the flats, internal, external designated amenity spaces for residents on that floor 14 previously shown, 35 square meters of play space provision on site, which is in a larger terrace area, and that would be aimed at youngest children. And the residents will also have access to the hotel spaces and podium level amenity spaces. The applicant has agreed to pay an off-site contribution for £17,670 for the shortfall in the play space provision. Again, none of that was provided in the previous provision. Residents will also have access to the podium and can pay for access to the amenity spaces within the hotel amenity spaces. So just looking at some of those floor plans, we've got 3 flats per floor in the levels 21 to 26. And these would be multiple aspects, I say, private amenity spaces in the terraces, and significantly larger floor spaces. The central part here has the distinct residential core, which has the 2 staircases and 2 lifts as well. And looking at upper floors, I've just picked out a sample here from level 27. But the flat, this has 2 flats per floor, multiple aspects. As I say, these flats have 2 large terraces, and as again large floor spaces, and these are replicated on floors 28, 29, and 30, which are also larger flats. Looking at the residential amenity space, a large amount of internal spaces, which would be used as cinema, gym, kitchen area, lounge spaces, and a playroom. There's also the shared terrace, which is the external area here, and this would include the 35 square meters of external play space. There would also be some bar and general public area, which is the blue space, which would be linked to the hotel. But as I say, residents would have access to that if they chose to use those facilities. Looking a bit more at the design then, and this is within the context of a family of buildings. The gold area here is the hotel, extreme sports building, residential next to it, and Tottenham Experience. And you just see that again, the emerging idea of the materiality and how that would work in relation to Tottenham Experience. The same drop. And you can see the residential towers. And what we've gone for on this proposed design is a more slender, taller building, but that would still be below the height of the tallest residential tower. And you just sort of see that in that context of those taller buildings that are emerging there. Again, just looking at that comparative scale, the height has increased, but this would be seen as a positive in providing a landmark wayfinding building, which would have prominence within the site and wider area. The slender blade-like appearance is again commended, as is the breaking up of the massing into three forms. This does sit comfortably in the context of High Road West's approval, and also the family of approvals we've had on the other wider sites. And it would be between the height of the tallest residential tower of plot 5, this one, and the High Road West towers. Again, just looking at a bit of the comparison there and the materiality, the darker copper cladding on the lower part of the building is seen as a more complete response to the darker materiality of the street level, and also the Tottenham Experience building. And then we have the more modern glazed and planner blades on the top parts of the building. You can see here as well the more slender design, especially in relation to the stadium, where you get that bigger gap there. You can also see the relationship between the heights of the tallest residential block building and on both, but realistically you're not actually seeing that in that context, given that it is approximately 80 meters away from this site, or this part of the site. So just looking at the wider heritage aspects, this is just outside the Tottenham High Road Historic Corridor and North Tottenham Conservation Area, which are the yellow parts shown on this plan. The red parts indicate the locally listed buildings, some of which have actually been demolished, but I don't have an updated plan on that, apologies. The blue represent the statutory listed buildings, and the one here is Warmington House, which is part of the Tottenham Experience building now. And just in terms of the heritage response, it has to be considered in the context of the extant permission on the site and the wider emerging context. The extant permission highlighted harm from demolition of listed buildings and works surrounding the retained Warmington House. These works have been undertaken in phase 1 already. Proposed immediate context is that of a tall building adjacent to heritage context of the High Road, so that would be similar to the relationship as approved. Haringey Conservation is in support of the improved street context and of the proposed design. Likewise, QRP members, Haringey Design Officer and GLA officers are all supportive of this design alteration. All of them consider this to be a slender design with improved materiality and massing to be significant improvements in the immediate, wider context and long views. Historic England have retained their objection from previous approval on the basis of the demolition, which have already been undertaken, and on the increased scale of the building. However, on balance, as with the previous approval, the public benefits outweigh the harm, or considered to. It should also be mentioned that the new and emerging context of approved development, as well as the proposed design improvements, are all considered to be an improvement on that extant permission. So just looking at the policy context for that, and E9 does consider suitability for tall buildings and how they will appear in long range, medium range and immediate views, as well as the contextual heights and how they will act in wayfinding, with an emphasis on architectural quality and materials. The extant hybrid permission accepted this as a suitable site for a tall building, and it is still supported in current policy. QRP panel members, Haringey officers and GLA members have praised the slender design and the fact that it would be a wayfinding building as a desirable improvement from that approved. The design of the immediate context, including relationship with heritage assets, is also more characteristic. Overall, the building is considered to sit comfortably within the emerging context and of a high quality design. So just looking at some of those wider views, this is just an outline of the proposed building in green, in the darker green, and then you see the residential buildings and the space between them in the lighter green. And as a closer up of this from street level, you do see that context of the darker shades of the lower part and the deep recesses of the balconies, which have all been praised by the design officers. And then the green outline here is of the residential plots as well. Just looking from the north, looking south, you can see the top of the building and how that has a close relationship with the existing building, existing stadium. And this is considered to sit comfortably within that context. And again, just another look from the west, which is Church Road, and you see again that the way the massing has been broken up in terms of the blades there. Again, something that has been praised by QRP and design officers. And just going very far out, looking at a view from Alexandra Palace, you see in green here, and also the emerging character of other approved developments on High Road West, etc. So in terms of the detailed design, we have had QRP meetings held in April, September and October. These have all been supportive of the height and the amended detailing and also the improved detailing as the iterations have come in. The Haringey design officers commended the amended design as a sleek, abstracted series of blades, as opposed to a squatter glazed form that was approved. And the predominant materiality of glass top and silver metallic cladding, with the lower section of solid copper coloured cladding, is considered to be an improvement on that glass dominated design previously approved. And the material palette does emphasise that strong base, middle and top. So just looking at that again, just in a bit more detail there, one of the design changes we have had during the discussion with QRP and with officers is to look at the base of the building, how that relates to the stadium and to the wider context. So that has changed from being the copper cladding going all the way down to the ground, and that would be the precast concrete panels which are used in the rest of the stadium. This is considered to be a successful relationship that they would have there. In terms of the darker hues of the copper cladding, as I say, that would relate closer to Warmington House and the more in the glaze and lighter bronze materials. I should also point out as well that the application will be supported by some walls which will feature artwork. We'll look at those in a bit more detail, but there's a specific example given there of how that would look. One of the other praises from QRP was the work they've done on the south-facing balconies and the greening that would be achieved through this. This would be for a series of planting boxes and deeper recesses, which mean that this would be a way of providing some greenery as a starting point for those residents there. And you just see a bit more detail of those materiality there, and the swimming pool and terrace area for the hotel and external guests. So looking at the forecourt entrance, again, this has got the independent residential entrance and hotel, and this has been praised by the by officers in QRP for giving greater legibility and access for residents and hotel users. There would also be a separate blue area here, which is the access to the amenity spaces on levels 12 and 13. That just means they don't have to all go through the hotel. Just a bit more context for the site. The ramp to the basements is here. This is the forecourt for the hotel, and it does have some planting along here. One of the changes at street level is that there would be no longer loading bays along here, so we do actually get a wider footway here, which is seen as an improvement by transport officers. You can see that dash line just about there, which shows where the canopy sits above the proposed forecourt there. And again, just looking at the design change we had of introducing the concrete panels and column. This was considered to give it a bit more of a lightweight appearance, and also just open up that area a bit more. A glazed canopy addition has also been removed, so it articulates that a bit better. There would be spaces here for those community art projects. We will have an art strategy as an obligation, which would be linked into that. And again, just a widened footway does give those seating opportunities as well, and rather than having the loading bays there. Again, just look at the canopy there and the green landscaping above that, which sort of helps humanise that area. And this is the access up to the podium with the lift access here as well. In terms of the greening, there has been additional attempts to improve the urban greening factor, and as you can see, rather than the more utilitarian design of the podium previously, they have sought to put in green walls here, And as I say, the canopy does have that green perimeter as well, which, as you see it from the podium level. This is a bit of the art strategy here, and it just shows the locations where artwork would be able to be displayed. What QRP and officers have been keen to emphasise is that would be a community feel to that artwork and really sort of represent what the community is and embed this in that community setting. Looking at the public rail wider site, there was a Section 106 obligation for the square to be opened up after the first event at the stadium. Obviously, there was with COVID at the time that slipped and hasn't actually been developed as yet. Due to security concerns, officers have agreed that this would be more appropriate to be delivered as the podium becomes more activated. And so it's likely to be when the plot 5 residential is approved, and then we'll obviously have the Tottenham Experience and the hotel opening up onto that podium, so it does create more of a public square. What we have looked for in the meantime is that the applicant would commence with the 12 annual community events. So that would bring people up to the podium and yeah, have greater community involvement beyond just a sporting and an event context. The applicant has also been doing meanwhile uses on plot 5, which are currently used for the multi-use games area and sports for the local community, and that will continue alongside the other uses. Just looking at that and the specifics of this site and that greening that they're looking to do here in terms of this northern seating area and that canopy area, and then on the experience part here and just on that street level there. So in terms of the amenity and microclimate concerns of a tall building, the amenity impacts are considered in context of the existing proposed and emerging wider context has been detailed within the environmental strategy that's submitted. The daylight silent impacts are not significantly worse and within target ranges expected in dense urban contexts. There is some minor overshadowing, but this is considered to have minimal additional impact on the wider area. Wind and microclimate have been reviewed by a third-party specialist. Although there have been minor impacts identified for comfort of some of the seating areas, these have been identified as areas that could be mitigated through a further review of the landscaping, and the applicant has agreed to have that reviewed again at that date. So in terms of the energy and sustainability, the policy around these areas has improved significantly since 2016 approval. The application has sought to improve materiality and passive design, maximise roof space for PV solar panels, whereas the previous one had no panels. The space for air source heat pumps on the roof if required. The application will provide a 47% improvement above Part L of the 2021 baseline. Provisional carbon offset of £196,365 plus 10% management fee. Monitoring reports will be reported and displayed, and the application is supported by a whole life carbon and circular economy assessment, which was not present in the previous. There will also be further energy and sustainability conditions and obligations as part of this provision. Just a quick look at the transport overview. As I say previously, the basement car park has been developed previously. That will be reduced from 76 to 64 car parking bays, which is commended, and we actually support that. They have active EV electrical vehicle charging for 20% built in, and there will also be capacity to have 80% in future, or further 80%, so it would be up to 100%. Cycle parking has increased from 50 more spaces from the previous approval, so that's 114 spaces in total. 5% of those would be suitable for the larger bikes. In terms of the servicing, the principle of removing the loading bays accepted as an improvement to the public highway. Further detail requirement is required on servicing at the podium level, and a site-wide strategy and associated podium landscaping, just to show that there wouldn't be any impact on there. The applicant has agreed to a servicing management strategy, which would be part of the Section 106 obligation, and that there would also be a review of the benefits to the street from the amended strategy, and that would be encompassing the active travel zone assessment and highway safety audit as secured as part of Section 27A as part of Section 106 obligation. a number of other conditions and obligations which have been added as a result of this application, including residential and hotel travel plans. And to emphasise, there will be a 3K annual monitoring of those rather than a single monitoring fee. Also, car cap developments, that would mean people can apply for permits, car membership, car club membership, and further conditions. So just in terms of some of the wider observations and other considerations, one of the current London plan policies does require urban greening factor calculations of biodiversity net gains beyond those proposed on this site. However, these are new calculations that are coming into force and recently come into force. So as part of the new London plan. So these were not considered at the time. Officers and GLA officers accept that the site constraints of the approved hybrid version and limitations, and that we do welcome that the efforts have been made on this plot, as well as a commitment to improve these scores in upcoming plots where there is more scope for that. In terms of the water and drainage strategy, the condition has been updated on that to consider climate changing as requested by GLA, and Section 106 obligations retained and have been refined as part of this application, and there will be additional conditions proposed to affect the updated policies. It's rather a long summary here, but just to emphasise that it is an amendment to the extant hybrid permission, and the fallback position is that they could build what was previously approved. It is considered to be a suitable mix of mixed-use development, aligned to policy. Viability review have confirmed that it is well below the threshold for providing affordable housing. The design amendments are supported in terms of the increase in height, with a more favourable, slender, taller design and improved materials. The design is in keeping with the emerging context in the area, better separation between the residential and hotel uses, and this does also allow compliance with the new fire safety by having independent cores. Enhanced residential layouts of floor spaces, improved amenity spaces for residents, and also the play space, again, which weren't present previously, and there will also be the off-site contribution, again, which wasn't present in the previous approval. Neighbourhood amenity will not be significantly impacted. Improved greening and relationship with public realm is welcomed. Improved energy and sustainability strategy, again, to meet current policy is welcomed. As are the improved training and employment strategy, highways improvements to public park lane, public highway, and the improved cycle storage and reduction in car parking. And so the recommendation of officers is to approve with conditions and update Section 106 obligations.
Okay, thank you. So do members have any clarification? Do members want to ask any clarification questions of the planning officer? So Councillor Rice, please.
Hello. Hello, Chair. As far as this hotel is concerned, is of course towers over everything in that part of the borough. Are you saying that the height of the hotel has already been approved by previous committee, and if we wanted to disapprove now, we couldn't do that because our hands are tied? And the secondary question, I note that in these lines of a rather generous allotment of car parking spaces, but get the developments on Tottenham Hill and there's not a single car parking space inside. What is it particularly special to Tottenham Football Club with its developments that it can achieve generous car parking spaces where no other place in the borough can achieve even one space?
Yeah, I can respond on those 2 points then. And so both really are linked to what was approved previously in the 2016 approval. So the approved height was 100 metres. So it was a tall building previously. This would increase it by 21 metres or up to 27 metres. So it is obviously a big increase in height, but that is contextual within that you're already building a tall building. So yeah, the applicant would have permission to fall back on that permission if we did refuse this. in terms of whether it's out of context with the area, as I say, it's not the tallest building on this wider site. The taller building would be the tallest residential building. Again, that has got outline permission. The applicant could progress that. And also those slides I showed on the High Road West, which show that they have a number of buildings over 100 metres as well. So it is a change in character there, and I think that's sort of reflected in this. And the bigger point on that is that the design is considered to be a significant improvement from that of the approved design. And the second point on car parking, again, this was something that was approved in the previous submission, and that car park has already been built. What we'll be looking to do is reducing that. They still have the number of disabled bays. They have some of them for the residents and some of them for the hotel. There would be a parking management plan as well as part of that, and I think that is a reduction there, but it's still above policy. And I think we're happy that there has been some compromise there to reduce it. Maurice, your mic's not on.
Hopefully you can hear me now. Okay, that one is done. All right. So the difference between this development and the developments in Tottenham Hale is that when Tottenham was building the stadium, they did a lot of excavations. So they went very, very deep to build the foundations for the stadium. And at the same time, they future-proofed the scheme by digging those foundations for the hotel and the subsequent blocks. So they have probably 2 or 3 stories deeper down where they can start the car parking compared to the developments Tottenham Hale, which is restricted by the Victoria lines and other elements. So that's one of the reasons why they could get more car parking in this scheme, because of the larger basement compared to the schemes in Tottenham Hale.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Ibrahim, and I think Councillor Jamieson, you wanted to speak. Councillor Bevan. Okay, Councillor Ibrahim, please.
Yeah, so mine was obviously you've gone into a lot of detail about, you know, everything in the whole scheme, but I just wanted, for my purposes and for everybody's purposes, to understand exactly what we're being asked to approve today, because much of this my understanding is already approved. So I want some like bullet point clarity on exactly what we're being asked to approve today.
Okay.
Sam, it looks like your signal's struggling. Shall I just take that one?
Yeah.
Councillor Fakan, so you have to consider this in the context of what's been approved, so the number of hotel rooms and the number of apartments, and then any changes beyond that, so the change to the design and all of the detailed things that flow from that broadly. There's also some enhancements in terms of the employment and changes to the conditions, so that's really what you're considering. We've tried to illustrate that as much as we can as a comparison, but it's really you could have this or this is proposed, and you know, are you happy with that change? That's really what your focus should be.
Councillor Jamieson.
So we've spent most of this meeting talking about water. And this is a colossal building, so there's going to be an awful lot of water from it. Are we doing, you know, how are we going to cope with all this extra water? I mean, 105 litres a day per person seems like, I mean, I know that's maximum.
Can you switch off your microphone?
I'm sorry.
Sam, are you happy to cover that?
Yeah, I can jump in. So if I'm cracking up, just jump in and say, yeah, in terms of the water assessment, it's obviously there's two aspects of that: the water use within the hotel and residential, and that is being reviewed in terms of, as part of the energy and sustainability obligations. The idea is just to obviously try and keep that as low as possible, and that's part of the B-Lean sort of approach to energy. In terms of the sustainable urban drainage systems and that sort of thing, that's all part of a wider drainage strategy for the site. So yeah, where possible within the wider site, they have looked to get natural green roofs and brown roofs and such, and obviously just having suitable soakaway and drainage capacity. Thames Water have confirmed that they still agree that this would be sufficient capacity within the area.
Councillor Bevan?
I've got 6 points, some for clarification. Firstly, can you tell me, have the plans changed since the new fire regulations came in with 2 corridors and steps and lifts and all that type of thing? The second point is the existing 106 contributions. Is there anything allocated to Bruce Castle Park? Because I would imagine that the residents in this hotel and the flats would use that park quite a bit. The third point is the carbon offsetting is costed at 30 years. I just don't understand. I'm assuming this building will last for 100 years. So why do we just cost it for 30 years? The fourth point is the cycle storage. I'm aware that TfL do not like the double racking cycle storage. So I'm asking that it be single racked, because they consider it a danger that people are trying to lift their cycles up high. I don't know if you can add that as a condition. And the fifth point is there any loss of light compensation payable to the adjacent residents? And my final point is Worcester Avenue, which I'm sure some of us know, make constant complaints about that road, which is not a through road, it's a blocked off short road, being used by articulated lorries. And in this plan, it seems to say that Worcester Avenue will be opened up as a through road. So can we have a stronger condition to cover that aspect?
Sam, just
Yeah, it's a good point.
Cover the first 2 points. We'll bring Suzanne in on carbon offset, and Maurice on cycles and Worcester Avenue. I think it's just worth saying light compensation payments are not a material planning consideration. That's a private matter between the parties that have that impact. So not something you can take consideration of. The impact on light of residential properties is different. And something that you can consider and is set out in the report, but loss of light and that compensation is a purely private matter. So go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, some good points there in terms of the fire strategy and getting the 2 cores. That was one of the big concerns actually of having the hotel and residential within the same building and having those independent cores. So that was a big driver for the applicants in coming in with this amended design. So yeah, that was definitely considered, and it has been to the HSE, and that they have considered that this would be within the regulations and an improvement on what was approved previously. In terms of Section 106 contributions for Bruce Castle, there is the play space offset contribution. We haven't actually designated that to a specific park in the locality as yet, and I think that was a discussion we were having internally as to where best to have that. So I don't know how that would work, Robbie, in terms of potentially going to Bruce Castle. It would be a local park anyway, where that offset would go to. But sorry, I should also say on the play space point as well that there is a shortfall one here. But as I said, they do have internal amenity spaces. They also have the podium, which will be delivered sort of towards the end of the completion of this. So there are those additional built-in elements of areas for amenity for residents.
And just on top of that, be mindful that this is the same number of residential units as was in the previous approval. So there is the uplift in play space, or in the need for play space, and that's reflected in the Section 106 contribution, which will go to local open space. Most likely Bruce Castle Park being the nearest and largest, but there's no uplift in units that you should be considering as an impact. That's already been assessed in the previous permission. Suzanne, do you just want to clarify the 30 years point?
Yes, the carbon offset calculation is based on the GLA guidance of offsetting any carbon reductions that haven't been met on site by 30 years. That is the current approach that we've taken in Haringey in our planning obligations SPD. It can be reviewed, but it's not at this moment the policy. So we are taking the GLA policy on that.
And then was the avenue in the cycle racks?
Councillor, I'm going to pick that one up. So all the cycle parking will be in line with the London Cycle Design Standard, and that's a TfL document. And within that document, it does recommend 2-tier cycle parking, and it sets what is the minimum width between aisles, which is 2.5 meters. So there's a condition attached to this planning application, which requires the design of the cycle parking to be in line with London Cycle Design Standard. So TfL do recommend 2 tiers. They have to be good quality and they have to have a minimum aisle width. So we'll double check all those, and there's a condition for that. I think Robbie can remind which condition that one is. So they do recommend 2-tier TfL, and whatever cycle parking is provided will be to that standard. In relation to Worcester Avenue, there is no plans to change the existing operation of Worcester Avenue. We currently have those bollards as put in, is supported with a traffic management order, which lowers them on an event day only, and it remains closed. So in terms of the issues that those residents are having, it's to do with lorries accessing the yard, and the bollards are still in place. So that will be unchanged. The only change may be for a later subsequent scheme, which requires a landscaping of Worcester Avenue, but that wouldn't open it up to true traffic.
Okay, I think that covers the question. So, all right, Councillor O'Donovan, quick question, quick clarification.
It is, yes, it is quick. It's on page 64 and 65. It's the section 106 heads of term, and particularly the public space, the public realm, which I think is important to people that is used for the benefit everyone lives in the area. It talks about public events, 12 a year, 4 to 6 years. Why only 6 years?
So yeah, I can just jump in there. The 6 years was part of the original permission, which was related to the stadium. I'm not entirely sure why it was 6 years, but presumably to bring people in, make it part of the community, and then it just take it from there. But yeah, it was taken from the previous approval, which had it for 6 years.
Okay, thank you. So sorry. So we don't have any objectors, but we do have the applicant team here. Mr. Laheen, we did, unfortunately, I'm sorry, we made a mistake. Because we don't have any objectors, you're not actually, sorry? Right, can you hear me? Is that better? Oh, God. Mr. Laheen. So what I was going to suggest, sir, is if the applicant team are here to answer any questions, if you'd like to come up with the applicant team and perhaps answer some questions. I do apologise to you. I didn't realise that we didn't have any objectors. So if you sit there with the applicant team. Oh, are there any questions or clarification for the applicant here? So I've got Councillor Worrell, thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on the security concerns related to the podium, in light of kind of other terrorist incidents and things like that. I wondered if you could just expand a little bit on those concerns and why it hasn't been able to be used by the wider community yet, and how that's going to be remedied to fulfill the S106 terms.
Please, yeah.
Hoping this one's working. Sounds like it is, yeah. It's a very good question, and it's pertinent really to the design and the opening of the stadium, which took place against the sort of background of various terrorist attacks in Manchester, Nice, and other places. So caused us to have to review the whole security strategy for the stadium. The southern podium was also developed within a sort of wider context of High Road West and Northumberland Park going forward. It sort of replicates the closure of Paxton Road, which was a historic east-west corridor. So unlike the northern podium, which is sort of heavily trafficked by pedestrians at the moment, students from the LAET, Duke's Aldridge Academy, club staff using Lily White House, and also our own security officers that sit at the base of the ramp, we're comfortable with that space being open to the public at all times, in effect. The southern podium at the moment, however, has no reason really for people to be going up on there. That will change, obviously, as development comes forward. So we are nervous about opening that up to the public at the moment, not so much from a counter-terrorism perspective, but we do have security issues, antisocial behaviour. Our FM teams have to clear up the aftermath of various bits of antisocial behaviour on a fairly regular basis on there. That's with it being closed off at the moment. So I think as time goes on, as this development comes forward, if it's approved, as the residential development comes forward, as the extreme sports building comes forward, and we have more natural activity up on that podium, it'll be a safer space to then open up to the public and make it more accessible and to sort of re-establish that east-west route across the site.
Thank you. Councillor Ibrahim?
So mine was a question about the fact that you're changing the service department to just standard apartments. So what have you or do you have anything in place to basically just stop them becoming a very lucrative Airbnb usage, particularly because of what's going to be, obviously it's right near it's next to the football stadium. You know, have you got anything in place to stop them just being used by whoever purchases them or rents them as just reletting them as Airbnbs, because that just brings a completely different character to something like that, and also there are security implications on that as well.
The principle of the conversion of the service departments from sort of an old C1 hotel use to a C3 residential use has already been gone through. So it's not part of this application to convert them from hotel service departments to so that's already been done. So hear everything you've said, and all absolutely relevant. And I think even within that, there are obviously restrictions across London, I think up to 90 days a year. So I think it's the same sort of restriction that would apply to those residential units as applies to anybody wanting to let out their house on an Airbnb basis.
Okay, thank you. So are there any further questions for the applicant? Oh, Councillor Bevan.
Well, in view of time, I'll just make one comment. You talk about it's going to be a training hotel, which I was aware of, and I know the Haringey Sixth Form College, which is the only college in the area, is really keen to participate in that. It could be a big benefit for all the local young people. And I'm just asking, in the papers it refers to training college, could it specifically refer to the Haringey Sixth Form College, which is the only local college? Could that be referred to in the planning papers or as a condition?
Yes, good question. I think we probably had wider colleges in mind, such as Cornell, but I think we'd be happy to specifically mention that as the nearest one. And I think it would be wise not to exclude any others, but giving that a specific mention would in some ways enhance that obligation. So we can include that with the agreement of the club, which I think I've had a nod. Yeah.
Might just add to that, Chair. I think Councillor Bevan, through our regular BCLG meetings, I think as the concept of the hotel develops further, I think that's the kind of thing that we bring back onto that agenda as well.
Okay, thank you. So are there any further questions? No? Okay. So I'd like to just ask Robbie McKnocker to confirm the proposal with a summary of any changes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So recommendation is to approve subject to section 106, and that's as set out in the papers and the addendum, and with the addition of specific mention of the Haringey Sixth Form College in the obligation for the training hotel.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll now move to the vote as the recommendation is to approve. So all those in favour, please show. Anyone against? Any abstentions? No. Okay, so that's granted. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Leheen, for coming along. Thank you. Okay, so we're moving quickly on to item 11, which is the print works at 819 829 High Road. This is pages 391 to 616 in the agenda. The proposal which is set out in the agenda, I won't read that out. The recommendation is to grant. And can I ask the planning officer to introduce this application, please? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So this presentation is for the Printwork site in North Tottenham. The proposal consists of two linked applications. The first is for full planning permission for the demolition of existing buildings and structures to the rear of 819 to 829 High Road, the demolition of 829 High Road, and the redevelopment of the site for purpose-built student accommodation and flexible commercial business and service uses. The scheme would also include hard and soft landscaping, parking, and other associated works. The second application is for listed building consent associated with the planning application. It would comprise internal and external alterations to 819 to 821 High Road, including the reinstatement of hip roof, demolition works to the rear, facade and related external works, internal alterations and other associated works. So the site is located opposite Northumberland Park Road on the western side of the High Road near to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. The site sits within the High Road West site allocation, NT5, which is shown on this image in blue. And Peacock Industrial Estate is sited immediately to the west of the site. And the site is bounded by Brunswick Square to the north and Percival Court to the south, which are both narrow laneways. Just to note that outline planning permission was granted for most of the site allocation, including the application site in August 2022, under a scheme proposed by Lendlease and Haringey Council. The Printwork site and development proposals can be accommodated within the parameter plans for that scheme. The High Road West Master Plan Framework, which was adopted in 2014, is also relevant in the assessment of the proposal. And the site falls within a growth area and includes listed buildings 819 to 821 High Road, as well as the locally listed 823 to 829 High Road. Of most significance is that planning permission and listed building consent was granted last year for a very similar development. The scheme included 72 homes and a cinema. The applicant has stated that the residential-led mixed-use scheme with the cinema cannot be progressed, as the operator that was due to take on the cinema has dropped out. but they have noted that demand for student accommodation has been identified and interest has been shown from Middlesex University, who have submitted a letter of support for the scheme. The London plan supports the delivery of student accommodation, and there would be operational difficulties in managing student accommodation and another form of housing, such as family housing, within the plan layout as proposed. This next slide just shows some images of the extant scheme. You can see that in the top left, there's the improvements to the High Road and the widened Brunswick Square and new public realm. And the images to the right-hand side are just showing the tallest 7-storey part of the building that was granted from Peacock Park in the future master plan. It just shows those 7 stories and recessed balconies. And then on the bottom left-hand side, you can just see the extent of the ground floor, which shows basically building across the ground floor with a podium raised courtyard at first floor level towards the western end of the site. So the proposal includes 287 student bedrooms with ancillary study and amenity spaces with 2 external courtyards at ground floor level. The first internal courtyard would be behind the High Road frontage, with the second courtyard towards the western end of the site. 35% of the accommodation would be affordable student accommodation, which equates to 101 units. And the proposals would also include 4 commercial units at each corner of the development to provide activation along the routes around the site. The main differences between this scheme and the one granted last year is that the changes relating to the use, with the cinema being omitted and the housing being changed to student accommodation. In order to accommodate an increase in floor space, additional bulk and massing has been added to the western end of the development, and the balconies have been removed as they are no longer required, with the courtyards and a roof terrace providing the external amenity for the student rooms. The basement car park has also been removed. So the next few slides just show comparisons between the extant scheme and the proposed, just to indicate some of the similarities between them. So on the left, you can see the ground floor of the previous extant scheme. The majority of that was covered by the cinema. The podium garden was then above that at first floor level. And then on the right, you can see the proposed scheme, which has the courtyards at ground floor level, one behind the High Road frontage and then one to the western end of the scheme. And so this image just shows the Brunswick Square elevations. At the top, you have the extant, and then below you have the proposed. So the idea of the former development stepping in height to the west is maintained, but you can see some of that additional bulk that's added to the western elevation, and also the balconies that have been essentially filled in as part of the proposed scheme. This is the view from the other side, the south elevation from Percival Court. So again, very similar, but some additional bulk and massing, particularly at the 5th floor level in this image. And then this is the west elevation. So this shows where the majority of that additional bulk is located, with an additional story in the central section. But predominantly the design principles are maintained from the extant scheme. And these next 2 images just show an isometric drawing of the extant and proposed. So you can just about make out here that there's the filled-in space where the cinema was on the ground floor, the raised podium, and the slightly lower central part of the western elevation. And then there's also the balconies on this image. And then this is the proposed scheme. So you can see where the additional bulk massing is, the roof terrace at 4th floor level, the ground floor courtyards. These next 2 images just show the High Road frontage. So this is the extant scheme, and then this is the proposed. So you can see that the majority of the changes, the upgrades to the heritage buildings have been maintained, and the buildings would look the same as what was permitted in the scheme from last year. And so in summary, the proposal is a well-designed mixed-use scheme of student accommodation and commercial space. It would safeguard the industrial uses on Peacock Industrial Estate and complement the future delivery of the High Road West Master Plan. It would deliver a London Plan compliant level of affordable student accommodation of 101 rooms. The scheme would optimise the site in a sympathetic way with internal open spaces and the bulk and massing stepping away from the high road frontage. The architecture and proposed materials would be of a high quality, and the proposal would deliver public realm benefits to Brunswick Square and Percival Court. Although the locally listed number 829 would be demolished, the proposal would provide heritage benefits, and the public benefits of the scheme would outweigh any harm resulting from that demolition. Student accommodation contributes to housing targets at a ratio of 2.5 to 1. So the scheme would contribute 101 net homes to Haringey's housing target. The accommodation would also help to free up other properties, potentially including family homes that are in use as student accommodation, and reduce the pressure to convert and subdivide homes for this use. This scheme would also contribute to infrastructure through SIL and through Section 106 obligations. So in summary, officers recommend that planning permission is granted, subject to the signing of a Section 106 legal agreement. That's the end. Thanks.
Thank you. So do the councillors, yes, have any clarification questions? So I've got Councillor Rice, then Councillor Worrell.
My understanding is that permission was granted about a year or so ago to build houses. Now we're back with the same line, it appears to me, seeking permission to build student accommodation. Why was it? I don't understand why that should be so. Why was it you file an application for planning permission to build houses, and you turn your back on that application and come with something else again, and perhaps next year we'll be back with another application to build a castle, maybe.
Yeah, as I picked up in the presentation, that scheme included a cinema, so the majority of the ground floor was taken up by a cinema, and the operator that the applicant had on board for that use has dropped out. So therefore, that scheme can't be delivered. It's no longer viable. So that's why this scheme has now been put forward.
Councillor Warren.
Thank you. I did raise this when we visited the site, but I think it's worth having it on the record. I would just query the assertion that building student accommodation purpose-built in an area like this would reduce pressure on HMOs nearby, because I think in practice what is more likely to happen is that it just means that students from other boroughs or from outside of London move into the borough rather than people moving out of existing HMOs in the borough into this accommodation. And because I think particularly kind of shiny new student accommodation developments do tend to attract people when they're looking for their, their place to stay, whichever borough they're in. So just wondered if that and, the sort of the trade-offs and the contribution to our overall house building target, what sort of evidence we're using to make that assertion. Thanks.
Yeah, it's just in the London plan, it picks up that these sort of buildings and smaller self-contained sort of single person units have that potential to free up space. So it's not sort of a definite guarantee, but it's something that's just suggested by the London plan that can happen. And obviously you just have a significant portion of the student accommodation that would be affordable as well, which means that those people would potentially have to find affordable accommodation anywhere, which is likely to be some of that cheaper sort of type of accommodation. So yeah, there's no guarantees that we can say however many number of houses would be freed up, but it certainly is likely to contribute to that.
And just to add to that, so you asked Councillor what evidence sits behind that. So there is an evidence-based document called a Strategic Housing Market Assessment, or SHMAR, and that's been produced for the emerging new local plan, but also for the new housing strategy that was adopted by the Cabinet a week or two ago. So there's an evidence-based document that sits behind those two things, planning and housing purposes, and it did look at student accommodation in that. So that evidence-based document does talk about student housing and student numbers are rising, and that it acknowledges that student bed spaces can be counted towards housing supply in terms of meeting our housing target. So that is established a planning evidence base, and that's in accordance with planning policy. So, so I just wanted to give an answer to the question on what evidence is that based on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Collette.
Thank you. I've read about the car clubs, etc., that go along with this plan. I didn't see any mention of bike storage, and in my experience, young people come with bikes.
Councillor, there will be 250 long stay cycle parking spaces. And again, those will be in line with the London Cycle Design Standard in terms of the layout. And there will also be some short stay cycle parking space, which is 9 in total. So that was a significant amount of cycle parking space.
Thank you, Councillor Ibrahim, please.
Mine was a follow-up on the point on the question asked by Councillor Worrell about the student accommodation and what it contributes to. So obviously, so on the basis that the claim is that it will free up potentially free up HMOs, but could does the SHMAR say that? Or is it simply that we believe that that might happen because there are different price points of the HMO market, or what a student pays for in a HMO is very, very different than purpose-built accommodation? And would it not be fair to say that it probably likely will not attract the same people? It will probably attract better off students.
Thank you, Councillor. So the SHMAR doesn't specifically talk about the link with HMOs. It talks about general housing supply and the ability to meet our targets. It doesn't specifically talk about HMOs. Just sort of related to that, though, it is worth reminding about the affordable student accommodation element. Just remembering that affordability element. Thank you.
Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, 4 points. So the first point is, will the sprinklers be required, or is that just an informative? Because I would have thought sprinklers would have been appropriate, even more so in this type of accommodation. I'm a bit concerned about the number of single aspect units, which seem to be huge. And it more or less says the few units that are not single aspect are where the students are sort of sharing. So the question I'm asking, is there any student room or unit that will not have an external window to look out of? That's, if you can just clarify that. And then there's only one single disabled parking space. Well, to me, with this number of units, that just doesn't seem enough. Even though they're young people, students, only one disabled parking space. I find that really unbelievable, to be quite honest. Okay, that's my points basically.
Yeah, just on the single aspect, it tends to be with student accommodation that's often unavoidable because of the nature of the, the size of the rooms. So whilst some of the, there are single aspect rooms, a lot of the amenity spaces are dual aspect, so that they have access to. all have windows. Every bed space would have a window. In terms of sprinklers, I'm not completely sure. It's obviously been through the HSD, who can content with the proposals, but I don't know if the applicant could maybe confirm that later or now if they want to. And then there was just another point on the disabled parking space. Maurice, I don't know if you want to come in.
Sure, Councillor. So the one disabled car parking space is in line with the London plan, and unfortunately for student accommodation, it's a different provision from the residential element, which is 10%. So only one is required.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Bevan. I think very simply on the sprinklers, worked a lot with fire engineers, and the proposal is certainly for a fully sprinklered project.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you. Just wondering if you could clarify, you said that there would be operational difficulties in facilitating other housing alongside the student accommodation. I'm just wondering if you can give me some clarification on what specifically those operational difficulties are. Yeah, I think it's to do with the plan layout. So the nature of having the high road buildings and having the courtyards behind. And I think talking to the applicant about the operator that they like to have on board, they focus on student accommodation. So trying to have that mixed management in the scheme would be really difficult to have a PBSA operator. And then there'll be, a difficulty knowing where that would be allocated and how the sort of affordable, the family homes would be reincorporated into the scheme. So I think that's mainly those sort of points, just about mainly operators seek to have control over the whole building, and then having someone else in there would be difficult.
So yeah, it's a specialism really for people who invest in student and people who manage student housing is their speciality. So they know what they're doing with that. Whereas when you bring something else in like social housing, that takes a very different type of management, and that creates problems. And then as someone wanting to invest in that, if that's not what they're used to investing in, then that becomes difficult for the operator to get the development approved and something they can operate. So it's really just impractical in those terms.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan, please.
Yes, as others have said, I am concerned about the student accommodation aspect. I understand that 2.5 students, lost my mic, 2.5 students is equivalent to one non-student piece of accommodation, if I understood it right. But that might be, or I might have misunderstood this, that's in terms of housing allowance or something. But what I don't know is whether that really transfers into answering housing need, as in we have so many people who actually need proper accommodation, and none of the students that we are accommodating are really in need of accommodation because they're presumably all coming from home. So do we think this is answering housing need? Thank you.
Yes, you're correct. So towards housing targets, the ratio is 2.5 to 1. So there's 287 bed spaces. So that translates to 114 units towards our housing targets.
And just to add to that, so yeah, housing need in the planning system is crystallised and defined by our housing target. So Haringey has an annual housing target to deliver 1,592 homes per year. So that is by definition the planning need for housing. And this proposal, in accordance with the London Plan Policy, which talks about the 2.5 students, gives you one home towards that figure. That counts, and that addresses that planning identified need, that planning housing target. So in planning purposes, it does address need because it's addressing the housing target that has objectively been set. And that 2.5 ratio comes from the adopted London Plan policy in 2021. So it's an up-to-date, relevant development plan policy that sets that situation out. So yes, it does meet planning need.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. So we do have the applicant team here. So are there any questions? Right, so Councillor Dunstall, then I've got Councillor Warren.
Thank you very much. I'm just wondering about the loss of the cinema provider and how that has now transformed the whole of it into a wholly new proposal. You know, why and why another provider couldn't be found to continue with what would add, I suspect, quite a lot of public benefit to the site, as opposed to throwing everything out and starting again.
We did talk to a number of cinema operators, some local, some national. We did really want to put a cinema in this development. There was quite a delay between the resolution to grant and the signing of the 106. And it's during that period, which wasn't a long time after COVID, that we lost the cinema operator. I don't know what the situation is as of today, but certainly by the time those conversations ended, it was quite a tough world for cinema operators generally. So they were the last commercial organisation standing, and we lost them. That's why we've had to kind of review and revisit what the scheme is. And at the same time, we're trying to respond to interest that's coming in terms of student accommodation and university interest in the borough. So we think we can make that contribution in a different way. And I think I'm right in saying there's also provision for cinema use within the High Road West scheme as well. So hopefully the prospect or the principle of a cinema isn't lost to the area completely.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Warren, please.
Thanks. I just wanted to pick up on the fact that the student accommodation is proposed to only be provided during term time. Is that correct? So outside of term time, it's going to be used for other uses, kind of short conference stays, that kind of thing. I think that makes it kind of even more not that satisfying in terms of the conversation we were having regarding our housing need, because the people using this accommodation, you know, they by their nature have a place to go back to. But I also think, speaking from relatively recent experience, it's not the ideal situation for the students. It makes you feel transient. You have to go through all this rigmarole of moving in and out several times a year. It kind of wipes out the option of spending time in the local community between term times. So I just wondered why you went for that option. Is it because it's more profitable to do that in between term times? Is it because students don't want to pay for the whole year? I wondered if you could shed some light on that.
I think in that respect, it's no different to any other purpose-built student accommodation in the country. Students can stay all year round. Some might take up local employment. Some might go home at term time. That's entirely up to the students. I don't accept that it causes a transient nature, and also some students might be there for the duration of their courses, which could be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years.
And Chair, if I may, it's worth clarifying. Page 396 of the package sets out that head of term, which explains the detail of that. So this wasn't necessarily something proposed by the applicant. This is London Plan policy that allows this. So the London Plan has anticipated this issue and set out guidance that explains how it would treat this issue. So one of the points in that, just down at the bottom, is that the temporary use shall not disrupt the accommodation of the resident students during their academic year. So it's designed to not go for specific periods. I'm trying to think of examples of if there's a golf event in St Andrews or something, I think the students do move out and in. It's not like that. So it really is to get that right balance, really, that over the summer when students don't necessarily want to be there, unless their course is still running. There's an opportunity for other people to come and use that, and you know, that will obviously add something to the area in terms of that. So that's a London Plan piece of guidance, and does include that safeguard to not disrupt those longer term residents.
So to clarify, it's not saying that you can only stay in term time and then after, in between terms, you move out. It's saying that if you choose to move out between terms, then the room will be used for something else. But you, if you wanted to, you could stay there with all of your things in the room the whole year.
Subject to the students' ability to afford that, yeah, it's entirely down to their choice, but there's no reason why they're turfed out during the summer holidays, for example, if they want to stay for the duration, absolutely.
Any more questions? Oh, Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, just on a similar point, I'm assuming you will deal with one university eventually, because if you don't, how are the cheaper flats, the 35% that are going to have a reduced rent for students who are not funded by their mum and dad bank, how would they be allocated if you're not working with one university? And then regards to the lengths of the tenancies, I know other operators offer various lengths, like 1 term or a full 4-year course, because they want the community to be verging with some stability rather than having every student moving out after 1 term. So I'm just wondering how you would ensure that your partner university implements their operation along those lines.
Just before you come into that, as we are getting close to 10 p.m, I just want to read out, for the record and avoidance of any doubt, and as we are approaching 10 p.m, in accordance with Committee Standing Order 18, please can we note that no meeting shall continue after 10 p.m, except that of discussion of the specific item or case in hand at 10 p.m. may continue thereafter at the discretion of the chair of the meeting. Consideration of any business remaining shall be deferred to the next ordinary meeting, except where the matter falls to be dealt with under the urgency provisions. Okay. So continuing on, if you can just.
So at the moment, I mean, we're only in discussion with one university, and the intention is that we would be providing student accommodation for that university. I think it's a London Plan requirement that they have to provide support, as they have done as part of this application, a letter of support. Normally it's dealt with through a nomination agreement, which covers all aspects of tenure within the accommodation. And as far as, now I'd have to double check this, but I think as far as tenure goes, normally they're on standard AST. So if a student wants to stay for the duration, if their course is 4, 5, 6 years, whatever it might be, they're perfectly able to do so. There's no, which I think contributes to the sense of community that you're trying to achieve. So there's no desire on our part to turf students out after 1 year or 18 months or whatever it might be. And in fact, the changeover costs and implications associated with that would suggest that it's probably better to try and keep the same student in that accommodation for the duration.
I just want to bring Robish's on.
Can this matter be put to the vote, please?
He'll be quick.
I'll be quick. I just wanted to come back on the question about student housing need that's come up a few times, and just give a fuller answer to that. I've done a bit of digging. So the London Strategic Housing Market Assessment, which is the evidence base that sits behind the London Plan, does all the detailed calculations on population, student need, and that so the behind the scenes of that is it talks about student need is including those students whose parents do not own a home and who cannot therefore act as rental guarantors for their children, and students who may, due to a disability or impairment, struggle to find accessible private rented sector accommodation that meets their needs. So that's what it talks about in terms of what the need figure. That's just one snapshot of it. and there's a need for 88,500 purpose-built student accommodation bed spaces during the plan period. So just wanted to provide that information as the evidence on need has been asked a few times tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'd just like to ask Robbie McKnocker to confirm the proposal with a summary of any changes.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Chair, I did ask that the matter be put to the vote. You ignored that. Madam.
That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. So we're putting it to the vote. Thank you, councillor, but I just want Robbie McKnocker to confirm the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So